Namaste, everyone. Today, let us ponder on the question of what constitutes life and what constitutes death. Is there any dividing line between what we know as life and what we know as death? Now, Sri Aurobindo announces, this world was built by death. Now, let us see what he's saying and why does he make such a statement? This world was built by death that he might live. Will thou abolish death? Then life too will perish. Thou cannot abolish death, but thou mayst transform it into a greater living. Now, this is what he says. So, if this was built by death, then what is the place and value of life here? Think about it. We know and experience death only when we know life. Only when we have lived or are living do we have the apprehension of death. Now, without life, how can we know death? And death is as much a part and fact of universal existence as life. And death is not a denial of life, because life does not cease to be even with bodily death. And the change of an eternal change of form and eternal change of experience is what constitutes immortality for us mortals at this stage of evolution. So death, that is dissolution of one form, dissolution of one body, is necessary for the progress of evolution. Why then is death so terrible, so repulsive, so undesirable? Maybe because more often than not, we associate death with the suffering, illness, and pain of the physical body. And yes, just think about it, our loved faces, our familiar faces become so unrecognizable when assaulted by a fatal disease. And when this body gives up, we feel we are conquered by death. Death has devoured us. But we forget that death is of the body only. The eternal, the immortal self continues to exist. For whether I live or die, I am always, declares Sri Aurobindo, and this is a declaration by one who has experienced and known immortality. So if we submit and subject ourselves to the self, to the immortal in us, we shall perhaps not feel the sting of death so bitterly. Death, it's true, cannot be abolished, but as Sri Aurobindo says, we can transform it. Rather, we can change our experience of it, our attitude to it. And we can seek for knowledge, that knowledge which shall give us immortality. And surely in the course of evolution, the law of mortality must yield progressively to the law of immortality. And we must also remember that we, the mental, mortal beings that we are actually ever seeking for the divine. We are aspiring for the infinite. But at this stage of our evolution, life would have no meaning without its mask of death. As Sri Aurobindo says in another one of his aphorisms, if life alone were and not death, there could be no immortality. If love were alone and not cruelty, joy would be only a tepid and ephemeral rapture. If reason were alone and not ignorance, our highest attainment would not exceed a limited rationality and worldly wisdom. Now, this is not to be misinterpreted as, cruelty, ignorance, death, and the like being indispensable for our existence. Yes, we have our vices, and I use this term in the purely humanly ethical sense. We have our vices in abundance. But let us reread and revise what Sri Aurobindo tells us. Here, actually, he's talking of contraries, and as we know, without contraries, there is no progression. So, he is talking of contraries, he's talking of opposing powers which ought to help us in our progress. And it is said, yes, we cannot progress unless we meet with these oppositions. And just think how true it is. If we were not haunted by death every moment, would we ever yearn for immortality? It is because we have death, because we experience death, that we try to find a remedy for it. There is our attempt to conquer it. Only when we reach that state of the soul and that stage of evolution, when we can conquer death, when we become conscious of the eternal, the immortal in us, when we can command our life energy at will, only then this ordinary death we can get rid of that. That will become unnecessary. Till then, life will continue to propagate in new and newer forms. Till then, it has to counter, confront, and try to conquer and overcome all the obstacles. And that is the exciting adventure of life. In the absence of opposites, without the need to struggle, there cannot be progress, there cannot be any sense of achievement. Take a very simple example from common life. Say a cricket match. We all love watching a cricket match. But think, what would a cricket match be without its fielders? Only when the batsman, in spite of the obstacles and opposition of so many fielders, hits a boundary or a sixer, does he attain any sense of achievement. Without this opposition, there can be no charm, no excitement to the game. It is a dull game otherwise. Similarly, in life, opposition and contraries are there to increase our desire, our pace for progress. And these are stimulants. These are our stimulants to aim higher and to discard and defeat these very obstacles. And Sri Aurobindo tells us, death transformed becomes life, that is immortality. Cruelty transfigured becomes love, that is intolerable ecstasy. Ignorance transmuted becomes light that leaps beyond wisdom and knowledge. So, our task is to transform and transcend our baser elements, and when doing that we reach the higher levels of consciousness, we shall find there are no contraries there, because all are forms and manifestations of the one supreme absolute. Thank you.